Hello, dear students. Welcome back to our study, Biological Science. Today we're going to discuss about the nature of life. And under that, let us first talk about the word biology, the science of biology. So, everybody knows that biology is the study of living things. And if we're talking about living things, they are the so-called organisms. Where can we find these organisms? In all parts of the world, in this planet Earth, organisms is there. Plants and animals. From the smallest one to the biggest one. Whether it is a plant or an animal, we call them organisms. Whether they are on the land or they are in the sea or in the ocean or in the water, we call them as organisms. These organisms class interact each other with their environment, including human being. Human being, we are also considered as a living things, and so therefore we used to interact with the plants and with the animals. The parts of the earth that sustain the life that makes up the organism, the parts of the earth that sustain life, make up the so-called biosphere. So, this biosphere includes the land, the water, and the air, where most of organisms or almost all organisms inhabit to these places. Now, why do we need to study biology? Why do we need to study this from the very beginning, even during our elementary days? The functioning of organisms is important to many people. Understanding biology will enable us to make wise decisions that makes all those things that affects every individual. Health and nutrition are also issues that involve biology. The decision to protect the natural environment, such as the forest, the marshlands, is sometimes made by voters. So who are the voters? The human being. And so therefore, there is really a need for us to study biology. Starting from the food, the clothing, the shelter, the health, and the fuel. These are directly from living things. And to study each of these class in a very simple manner, we can just look around and find those results of studying the living organisms. Let me give you an example. The foods that we are busy eating. We can make our different menu if we know those kinds of foods, those kinds of plants and animals are really edible or palatable to eat. For the shelters, which quality of plants will gives us? Which is the good plants that will give us quality materials for our shelter? Come to think of that. And the clothing. The clothing, most of this are all biological products. The wool, the silk, the leather that comes from the animals. The cotton, the linen are all from plant materials. So you cannot tell me that we can just harvest those plants without even knowing what type is really needed or intended for that fabric which is intended for our clothing. The shelter, like what I said, those are the materials for making houses, for making buildings. The forest that provides us wood, and the health. Like these days, we are busy looking forward for what organisms, for what kinds of plant that can help us to fight, to make medicine or vaccine for this coronavirus. So we are busy looking on that continuously. Those who are involved in the manufacturing, in the inventions, and dealing with all these things, class, they really need to study biology. The last one is for the fuel. Where do we get this fuel? Long time ago. Somewhere there in the other continent. Which continent gives us a lot of fuels? So do you believe that long time ago, those fossils, those big, huge animals, they turn into fossils? And that is the reason, while on the Middle East, those countries wherein they have a lot of mine, those are because of the fossils. Those dinosaurs and other big animals that has been buried there, now here comes the time that we can mine them. We can get fuel out of them. Okay? So, in order for us to come up a very good study about these things, we need first to understand the characteristics of those living organisms. How do we know that they belong to this group of living organisms? Imagine we have the so-called living things and non-living things. How did you know that this one belongs to living things? What are the different characteristics of life? If we said that biology is life, biology is the study of life, what are the different characteristics of those organisms having life? Okay, I'm sure you know that one already. They breathe. They are made of cells. What else? They are highly organized. What do you mean by highly organized? They have the capacity to think. They have a very specific structure. You know, class, in some instances, even if you are telling me that that one is ugly and that one is beautiful, still they have the characteristics of the so-called life. And living things respond to the environment. That is what we call the stimulus response reaction. You look at the behavior of the touch-me-not plant. Do you know what touch-me-not plant? That one is the macaya. If you touch the leaves of that, it will close. So therefore, they respond to stimulus. There are animals that when you touch them, or when you sit beside them, I don't know if you have here in the Philippines, they can copy our colors or the colors of where they are attached. So, in that case, we respond to the stimulus. And then, living things reproduce. Living things reproduce. It means to say that even though you know what, class, we have two theories. The theory of the divine creation and the theory of evolution. So we are in science, so we belong to the theory of evolution. According to the theory of the divine creation, we became procreator of God. We create boy and girl. We create children. And that is a very good blessing. The gift of God given to us. In the theory of evolution, we reproduce. It's because of the cells within our body, the chromosomes, the cells. Later on, as we go further with these studies, we will discuss all those things little by little. Living things grow and develop. You cannot tell me that that one is living organisms if they are not developing. The human being, they grow. They change their height, they change their size and shape. The plants, they grow from small seedlings to a huge tree. They move from one place to another. Look at the animals, from one place to another. Look at the human being. And the plants, they crawl. They climb. Okay? So living things adapt to their environment for survival. All the living things, since the living things has the capacity to think, well-structured and well-organized, most especially the human beings, since we are the highest form of animals, the highest form of animals, we can adapt to our environment in order for us to survive. The cactus, given as an example, adapted to dry environment. They don't need most of the water. The snake is adapted to live along the spines of the cactus. Those camels are adapted to the desert. The fishes are adapted to the water, to the oceans, to the seas. And what about human beings? Where do you adapt yourself? Of course, we can adapt whether we live in the rural area or whether we are living in the urban area, whether in the Philippines or in abroad. We need to adapt ourselves in order for us to survive. Okay. So, therefore, we belong to living organisms. It's because those are the characteristics of life. Now, talking about the levels of organizations of life. Biology can be studied from the smallest part of living systems, the molecular level to the most complex level. What do we mean by molecular level? If we're talking about molecular from the word molecules, it means to say that we are talking about the cells. Cells is the fundamental unit of life. Or let me say in chemistry, it is the atom. In biology, it is the cell. And the cell is composed of a tiny particle called molecules. Then from there come up with the DNA and the RNA. The DNA, we have that separate topic on the genetics and genetic engineering. But just a little bit of that. DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid. And the RNA, the ribonucleic acid. To make it simple, class, under the molecular level, we're talking about the inheritance of the traits from the parents to the offspring. The second level is the cellular level. The cellular level, we're talking about the smallest unit of life, carrying the functions of the living things. Like what I said, it is the cell. The tissue level. Tissue. We have different tissue that forms the cells with different specific function. Also, this tissues are all about tissues and other systems. It's there. We can tackle it later on as we go with the reproductive system, with the different systems that we're gonna study later. The organ level. the organ system level, the population level, the community level, and the ecosystem level. Okay, so as you can see, we have different levels, but the one that I mentioned to you, let us be specific from the very beginning that we are focused on the cellular level, because with the cell, everything is there. We can perform different activity, that we can adapt ourselves to the ecosystem, to the surroundings. It's because if we're talking about ecosystems, we are talking about the community of organisms. Okay? The molecular level, like what I said, the DNA and the RNA. The organ system level, those are the organs. Let me just give you an example. Our body, those are the organ system that makes up our body, the body of organisms. Whether in plants or in animals, we have that organ system. The population level, those are the different species that lives together in a certain place, in a different places. Like what I said, in the biosphere. And those are the important things that we need to understand. So, for now, class, I hope that you understand why there is a need to study biology and what makes the organism belongs to living things. Okay. So, in some cases, before you proceed to the next level of another course, you need first to study what is biology. And of course, to sum it all, the nature of life. Thank you very much for watching, and on the next topic, we will discuss more all about the nature of life. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Stay safe and be blessed. Happy learning.